they'll all kind of maybe tie in with a theme that they're doing for that particular grade. And everything is always taught to the age. So you're teaching really to the consciousness of the child and the age they are, rather than just saying, well, we need to cover this much by this age, or this child is behind. There's not really a behind. There can be a behind for people, maybe with learning disabilities or special needs, but there's no behind for the regular class because everything is taught to what age you are. So there's more themes we're teaching to their soul rather than teaching to just pure skills. I think in traditional school, you're looking at, they need to be this much in their math skills or this much in their reading and language arts. Waldorf unfolds that very, very slowly and naturally and more organically and it's very human way of learning. That's why I loved it. It's not robotic, and it does everything it can to avoid abstractions.
Hey friends, it's Lacey again. I am excited to connect you with Annie Haas, who is joining us today. She actually joined us on the Homeschool Open House a few weeks ago and has loads of wisdom to share. She is a homeschooling mama, and she got tons of great feedback on what she shared with us during that homeschool summit. So if you haven't checked that out, you need to go back and check that out. But I'm excited to get to know her a little bit more with you today and ask her some kind of candid questions and hear what her homeschooling journey has looked like. Whether you're homeschooling or not, I'm sure you'll pick up some tips about living your life as a schoolhouse, no matter what age you are. It's never too late to incorporate some of the things that I know that we're going to talk about to just encourage learning every day, because that's when we feel our most fulfilled. So Annie, I am super excited. Annie owns and operates The Child is the Curriculum, and we will get to why it's called that shortly, I think. But Annie, first, I would love for you to share with us, how did you grow up? Because I think getting back to the beginnings is always really interesting with homeschoolers. Were you homeschooled? Did you always know you were going to homeschool? What did that look like for you? What was your school experience?
I was not homeschooled, but I wish I was. But I did grow up with very free-thinking parents. I grew up with rather hippie parents, and they allowed a lot of freedom. Mm-hmm. So when I wasn't in school, I was exploring and doing all kinds of things and had the freedom to kind of, learn what I want and was encouraged in that way. I really didn't like school. So I think that's, that was my experience. I did some. It really always depended on the teacher. Yeah. And my favorite parts of school were music and the arts and things like that. Those spoke to me the most. And yeah, so I wish I was.
I've already told my mom. I'm like, Mom, you should have just homeschooled me. And she's like, yeah, maybe, but it was weird back then.
Yeah. I think my mom would say the same thing. Yeah.
Right. There wasn't a community. I think nowadays we are fortunate that there's so much in terms of resources. So yeah, it's definitely a different era when it comes to homeschooling. So you weren't homeschooled. You went to just traditional public school, and then you went to standard college. You did tell me a little bit beforehand that you waited a few years before you went to college, which I think is really interesting. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think I did I did go to a semi-private high school. So I was in a public schools until I was in a semi-private high school in Vermont. And the reason that we were able to go, although it was technically a public school, is they didn't have any other schools around except for that semi-private school. So the state would pay. There was no other public school, so the state would have you go there. So it was really nice because the school was very, very well for the arts and for music, really, really good. Mm-hmm. So I think in that way, I got to kind of experience that and probably paved the way to my future. And then I did take a couple of continuing ed classes after I graduated high school, but then I just really felt like I wasn't quite ready for college yet. I think I just wanted to just breathe after all of that schooling. I wanted to just really experience some freedom, I think, so I didn't go back to college until later on in my 20s and finish then. So
I think that, okay, what did you do in that period, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, I had a child. So that's when I had my son. I had my son when I was 22. I actually did go to a community college for a couple classes and played jazz flute. Yes. And I took, cause I was a musician. And so I also took, I took recording techniques. Before it was digital. So it was, I'm showing my age. And I took photography classes and things like that. So I kind of just dabbled in stuff that I wanted to do, not necessarily for a degree for a while. And I traveled around and went to concerts and just lived a nice, I wanted to enjoy being young before I was, strapped into whatever career. I just wanted to just experience life. So I did that for a while. And then after I had my son, I was like, I need to buckle down and get serious. He's got a future too. I need to go finish my degree now. So I actually brought my son to art college with me. I was a single mom, and I brought him to live on campus with me as a single mom, and he went to preschool while I went to class. And so I just did that. I worked. He had a very flexible preschool where he could just go for just while I was in class, and then I'd pick him up when I was done. So he literally was in art school with me. So he was in the studios with me while I was sculpting. He was.
So we probably had all of the same teachers at App, because I was an art major when I was there too, and my husband was a BFA from Appalachia.
You were in the art department too. Yes.
We missed each other by a hair. Oh my goodness.
In that big square building.
Big square building. Yeah, we spent so many hours in that building. Anyway, how cool. And so I didn't know that you could have a child and stay on campus. That's really awesome. I didn't know that.
They do. They have non-traditional student housing at App, which is wonderful. Not all colleges do. So they were really great. And so, brought my son to art school. And he went to gallery openings, and he was the star of the show, because I had a little 3-year-old running around all the art and having, cheese and grapes. And
we'll have to talk later, because I think you probably know one of my close friends who also had a baby in art school at the same time you were there. So.
Oh, well, we definitely need to talk about that then. Cool.
So anyway, okay. So then how did you transition into this idea? I mean, it sounds like you just automatically like we're in the mindset of have your child with you kind of thing. But when did you decide to homeschool, and what did that sort of look like?
Well, I wanted to homeschool from the beginning, but my son's father wasn't really into that. Sometimes, and this happens with a lot of parents, or one, there may be two parents are not on the same page. I talk to a lot of families that they're not on the same page, and one believes in homeschooling, the other doesn't. And so then you can't go forward with it. So I couldn't for a while. And then eventually I did. By the time he got to 5th grade, I was able to pull him out of school, especially because he wasn't particularly thriving. Even though he was in one of the best public schools up in the mountains, he still just was not. It was not the curriculum itself was not. He was not thriving on that curriculum. And so then I pulled him out, and we dabbled in a little bit of unschooling mixed with Waldorf, and we loved it. We had the best year of our life doing that. Like, we were just so. It was one of the best years of my life. It was awesome.
Okay. Oh, that's awesome. So how old is your son now?
So he is 19.
Wow.
And he is now out in the driveway fixing his car himself. So.
That's awesome. He's a success.
Very, very independent. He's wonderful. He built his own computer from scratch in 9th grade. He wants to be a graphic designer, so that's his path. But he also loves to work on cars now. So he was kind of in the mechanic. He's very engineer oriented.
Right. Yeah. Building.
Yeah. So, yeah. Was always into that. Anything engineering.
So is he college bound? Is he planning to get a higher education, or?
He does not like that college is how expensive it is these days, and the debt. He doesn't want to be in debt. So he's either going to go to technical or trade school to do what he wants to do to avoid debt. He's very smart with money, and he doesn't want to he doesn't want to do that. So, and he's also taking his time, and right now just wants to do he's following in his mom's footsteps. He just wants to take time before he goes and does it, which I'm allowing completely. That's what he wants to do.
He'll figure it out, right? Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so you said you started out with unschooling, which is sort of just letting the child kind of lead the way, right? And then with the Waldorf, how did you incorporate that? Because I think a lot of people are new to that sort of methodology. It's kind of not everyone has had exposure to the Waldorf world. So if you could kind of just share, what does that look like for you and how did that develop?
Well, I've always obviously been into, my whole family is all down the line. Is There's nobody in any profession in my family on either side, my mom or dad's side, that isn't an artist, a musician, potter, um, photographer, writer. It's just there's that's it. So I didn't really have a chance to not be involved in music and arts. Um, there was no chance. But so Waldorf naturally is a lot of arts and crafts and music, and so I naturally always gravitated towards it and always loved it from a distance. And you know, but so it also, Waldorf is a very nice compromise between people who you don't necessarily want to do full radical unschooling, and those who also really don't want to do full traditional homeschool at home, you know, where you're doing school at home. It is sort of this wonderful thing in between, is just how I see it. And so when I started, I was like, well, then I'll do Waldorf, because we don't have to really deal with grades and textbooks and things like this. And I'm already naturally very arts and crafts oriented. And so naturally I tried that. My first year I did Christopher's Waldorf curriculum, which is a big name Waldorf curriculum, but they didn't have sixth grade when I did it. So she only had book recommendations and maybe some overviews. So I had to piece it together myself by reading Steiner, and also just looking at what was there and what the typical things were for sixth grade. It's most people don't start with Waldorf in middle school. They would start maybe from first grade and go up, you know. So it was a challenge, but I just loved it. I loved it so much. I loved it that much that I was like, this is it. And so I just was home. I was home right then and there.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about like the arts kind of on the one side, and then the kind of the curriculum, I think, on the other side. And I think it's really interesting. That's how I think about Waldorf, is how you can't really isolate these two things out. And when we try to, you might meet the needs of one child, but another child is, you know, the pieces just never fall into place. And I know that Waldorf talks a lot about this, and I would wonder if you would touch on it a little bit, like what is the sort of ideology around incorporating the song and the, you know, the math, and, you know what I mean, the instruments, and, you know, history or whatever. How do they intertwine all of those? And what is that? I don't know. Lay that out for us a little bit.
Well, yes, everything is very integrated. Steiner said that the music teacher should be talking to the main lesson teacher, and then talking to the handbook teacher, so that they can integrate as much as possible. Waldorf has one teacher that stays with you from first to eighth grade, so that they can really know the children very, very well. Of course, we don't need to do that as homeschoolers. We already know them. So we're staying with them through. So it really helps us, because we know them so well. And then what else was I going to say? It's where Waldorf has a main lesson, which is, you know, in the morning, and in the schools I'm talking, they have it from 8 to 10 in the morning. They have a main lesson with their main lesson teacher, and then they go off to extra subjects in the afternoon, handwork and woodwork and other subjects. But you know, they'll all kind of maybe tie in with a theme that they're doing for that particular grade. And everything is always taught to the age. So you're teaching really to the consciousness of the child and the age they are, rather than just saying, well, we need to cover this much by this age, or you know, this child is behind. There's not really a behind. There can be a behind for people, you know, maybe with learning disabilities or special needs, but there's no behind for the regular class, because everything is taught to what age you are. So there's more themes. We're teaching to their soul rather than teaching to just pure skills. I think in traditional school, you're looking at, they're, you know, they need to be this much in their math skills or this much in their reading and language arts. Waldorf unfolds that very, very slowly and naturally and more organically and it's very human way of learning. That's why I loved it. It's not robotic, and it does everything it can to avoid abstractions. So anything that is abstract is more for an older, you know, the teenage age. And Waldorf has 7-year cycles, which are really important. I usually talk about this. So there's something different that we teach to from 0 to 7, and 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. And those 7-year cycles even go on for adults. We change every 7 years. So I'm just turned 42. So I just went through my 42-year change.
Well,
So
that's so fascinating. Yeah. I think a lot of times I've been kind of looking at the years even, and even we follow the Hebrew calendar, and it's the same. There's a 7-year cycle within that as well. And I think it's just so cool how those things kind of cross over and make it kind of tangible. And it's really wholesome. I feel like there's just like a holistic is what I think of when I think about Waldorf, because it thinks of all of the, the spiritual needs and then also the physical needs and how that all interrelates. And it's important to connect all of those dots. So yeah,
it's very relaxing because we're never in a state of mind where we're trying to push too much too soon. And it really avoids doing too much too soon. The only thing is that some people feel uncomfortable letting go that much. Some people feel like we've been so in the school mindset that, unschoolers have no problem letting that go. But anyone that's not, it's just be like, well, but, because mine didn't read until age 8, and a lot of people can't.
Mine, and it's hard. Even for people who understand that, knowing that other kids are reading at 4 and 5, it can be like, oh no, there's something wrong with my child. Even when don't worry, it will come together. It will come together and they will take off. I mean, it can be really worrisome.
And it does every time. And then they read even beyond my expectations. So they're already started reading at 8, but is already at probably 2, reading level way, way above just a year later at age 9. So almost 9. So it is hard to let go and trust. And so that is when the mom maybe needs to do a bit of deschooling. And that's actually where unschooling books would probably benefit Waldorf, even Waldorf-oriented families. It'd be good to read all the unschooling material so that you can sort of deprogram yourself a little bit and relax and let go and just say it's going to be fine. And then when you bring in that wholesome, rich, I kind of like viewing Waldorf as unschooling with indications sprinkled on top. It's like a fertilizer.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So that you can, and a lot of people will do that. They will pull in from Waldorf what speaks to them, what they're able to do, because it can be a lot. It can seem like a lot too.
Well, it can be overwhelming when you start looking into it because there's so many resources out there, as with anything, and that can be overwhelming. But I like. And
you don't have to use them all,
or any of them. You can.
Or any, yes.
Right? Yeah, I think it's just So just talking to that. So you called your work "The Child is the Curriculum," and I love that. Can you explain how you came to that, and maybe that will help even lead you to sharing maybe a book or something that you would recommend for folks to read if they're just getting started?
Yeah, so the child is the curriculum comes from a Steiner quote. The quote is actually the child himself is the curriculum. And what that comes from is it's not exactly, some people think Waldorf is child-led. It is in the sense that we're reading the child to bring them what they need in the same way that we would, when they're learning to walk and we're holding their hand, we're still helping, it still can be very parent-led, but still where the child doesn't feel like they're being led. We know we're kind of becoming a child whisperer in a way of where we know what they need before they do, because we know human development so well. And so they're going to like what we bring. It's just because we know them very well. And then we can also, with homeschooling, tailor it right to them specifically. But so the child is the curriculum really also means that it's our job to study child development so that we can have them be the curriculum, so that we know what we need to bring them. And so that does take work. And that's kind of, that's kind of what is set the website up, is to do the work to study the human being. So to study the developing human being, not just human beings. Humanity is very good with all of the physical, child development.
Right.
But we are not so great with how is the child's consciousness and spiritual life developed. And by spiritual, I mean their inner life, the way they're viewing outward. We're putting our adult selves in their shoes, in their consciousness, to see how are they seeing, how are they seeing me? How are they seeing this lesson? How's the child taking this lesson in, and how are they going to remember it when they're 40 or 50 or 60 years old? And so we're getting in the child consciousness. So the book I always recommend beginners is the Child's Changing Consciousness. It's a book Steiner wrote. It's the easiest of Steiner's stuff to read because it's just it's his one of his more simple works for beginners, for complete newbies, and it really, he walks you through the child's changing consciousness so that you can see things from their point of view, and that's what makes them the curriculum. So if you know where they are, then you can know what to bring them, instead of just like, well, I'm just going to arbitrarily bring in this at this age for, but you need to, but why? And so Steiner really explains all the why. Why do we bring physics at grade 6? It's not just arbitrary. It's because literally they're coming more into their bones. They're heavier weight. There's literally the physics in their bodies.
That is so fascinating. It makes me think, we do all this when we first become pregnant, we start doing all this research about the baby developing inside of us, and we read up on it, and then they get to be 5 or 6 years old, and we just expect, I think, our teachers to tell us what to expect from our kids, right? And some of the things I see, like that I've learned from Steiner specifically that have been so helpful is, children are all different in their physical, how they develop too, and why we expect them to all be at the same place mentally and spiritually, and like you're saying, consciously, when they're also different physically. I mean, it's just kind of odd to me. And so I love the idea of laying it out like that, because it's really almost like just an extension of like what to expect when you're expecting, right? Like you're just like, keep on going and
just keep going. And it really is the teacher's job. Steiner did say that teachers should be like doctors, and actually that teachers should maybe study a bit of medicine too, so that we really can understand the children and know them all really well. Like if they're showing a certain symptom, we should know why, and actually the curriculum can act as medicine. So all the Waldorf curriculum, the reason that they do certain subjects at certain ages is really, it's like a therapy. So for the 9-year-old, the reason that they do, shelter building and all that is because they're at 9, they're just really feeling all of this shaky, like, oh my gosh. And so we bring them all these things as medicine. So we need to view the curriculum sort of as their medicine, rather than something they have to get through. Instead, it's these doses.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful. Yeah. It makes me think, oh man, I need to get some more curriculum. So but I am going to get that book. I love it. Okay. All right. So you've already shared a book that you love. What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out, in terms of like, the simplest piece of advice that you can offer?
The simplest advice is, well, not to panic, because usually when people are starting out, they just are really nervous. There's a nervous energy about them. They're afraid usually that they're not going to cover everything, or they're just in general nervous. One of the reasons I read Steiner so much is he puts a lot of that to ease constantly. When you're reading him, it's just constantly like, oh, it's like a bath. Even though for some people it might be stressful because they have not read him yet and it's maybe just new. So I guess the simplest piece of advice I would give is to deschool, is to do that deschooling and reading the unschooling material, because you've really got to deschool yourself before you can know that you can homeschool. Yeah. And then you can start. It's kind of like this. I view homeschooling, I compare it to a garden a lot. You have to, clear the soil, work the soil, till the soil first before you plant anything. And everybody just wants to rush in and just throw seeds in the soil and see what happens. It's the same thing with homeschooling. But it's like, no. Let's get the soil all rich first. And what that means is let's help the mom feel really good, because you need to feel really good before you can get to that point where you're going to bring it in the right way. And that love is really the most important thing. And so, and the way that we bring it, and Steiner said, who we are is more important than what we do. So everyone's figured out what to do. All the curriculum out there. I'd suggest somebody spend their first year going minimalist homeschool, rather than less resources, less lessons, definitely not lots of facty lessons. Waldorf is not very facty. We're much more teaching to the feelings between the age of 7 and 14. So you're teaching to emotions. So the stories. And then even when you're writing, like using feeling for everything. So we're teaching to feeling between 7 to 14. If we teach to the head too much at that age, it's too much. And if we teach, you know, to the hands or physically exhaust them too much, they get exhausted. Like, you know, my piece of advice would be to just relax first and do less and try a minimalist homeschool approach at first.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I don't just dive in from out of one system and into another one. Let's clear those waters a little bit. I think that's so smart. Everything relates back to gardening. So
yeah, it does. And spending as much time outdoors as possible, too, you know, like a lot of outdoor time for them and a lot of movement. So we don't ever do where we're sitting still at a desk all day. Even if we are sitting there doing arts and crafts for a while, they get antsy about half an hour in, and then it's like, okay, out and go on the pogo stick or go on the trampoline, or they have to. So we do have, like, you know, breathing rhythms within the day, and letting it flow, and we're not forcing anything that isn't naturally coming from them. So that's also why the child's a curriculum. Yeah. You have to listen to their cues when they're hungry, when all of it.
Yeah, if they're whiny and cranky, maybe it's not the day to sit down and make sure they hammer out those math drills, you know? So yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. Yeah. Okay, so one quick tip that you maybe would use, that's just like some example of something that you would do when maybe the day is not going as planned, things are just awry. What's just something you would do to kind of flip that on its head?
I would probably just do one of their favorite things. You know, whether it's, we go outside. They love to bake, you know, let's bake something, you know, there's some math in that, let's do that. And I would be very present with them. I know when we're troubleshooting, it's really good to, you know, have their full attention. Don't be distracted, be right there with them until they're grounded again. And then they're all set. So, to turn a day around, throw out whatever you're doing, especially if you're in the middle of a lesson and it's just not going well and they're flipping out. It's not worth it stressing them out. It's just not. We either need to find another way to do it, or it could be something physical like food or something. Right. Bring them down first, wait till they calm down, then come back to it. Because a lot of times I've been in the middle of a really frustrating lesson, and then I'm like, okay, we're just going to shift gears. We're going to go do this now. We're going to take a break. You know, I always break when they're like that. Yeah. No, we just don't push through that. And so a lot of times, though, even 30 minutes later, they come back and they're doing it whiz through and smiling. And so it's amazing. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So sometimes you don't have to throw it away completely. They just need that break. Yeah. So you can turn days around. And if all else fails and it just keeps happening again and again, then call it a day. Call it an unschooling day. We'll do, that's okay. And that's it. But we rarely have days like those, you know, unless, and again, and they will read your mood and your energy too. So for Waldorf, especially, one of the biggest things about Waldorf is the inner work of the teacher, that we have to do inner work on our own selves, that we have to come 10 times more prepared to them. So I will do lots and lots of prep work just to teach them a half an hour lesson. I might take 2 hours of prep to do something like that. And that might include me needing to meditate, or me needing to imagine to myself, how do I want to bring this to this child and why? And me making sure I know my stuff and being really prepared, because they're not going to take you seriously if you're in the middle of a lesson. They're just going to say, well, if my mom doesn't know it, you know, then why do I have to know it? Literally, they'll think that in their subconscious. And so, you know, they'll think, well, they're that age and they don't even know. Why do I need to know that?
Yeah, because I think I hear that flying around our house all the time. Well, I never learned that. Or, you know, like, well, I don't remember my times tables, or, you know, whatever it is. And it's
and it's one thing to forget something real quick, but another thing was like, wow, my mom doesn't know what she's doing today at all, you know?
Yeah. Woo.
So, and we all have days, but then we need to say, okay, I'm going to regroup. I don't actually feel prepared for this lesson, so I'm going to bring this next week when I feel more prepared for it. I try not to bring in anything that is not really coming from myself too. This is harder for Waldorf teachers because a lot of times we also memorize stories or do things like that, but not always. But we want them to take us seriously, I guess is what it is. If you're bringing them a formal lesson, if you're not, and you're just casually doing knitting or something like that, then you can be casual and work with whatever, mistakes come up and everything.
Well, I love that one thing that you said about, especially what am I bringing and why? I feel like that why piece is something that we all, if you're you're homeschooling for the first time and it's because of, the situation going on around the world, you have an opportunity now to ask that question, what am I doing and why? And I think that's really big, right? Because it's been because that's what we do in public school, right? And now we get to say and why, and that's really powerful, actually. So I hope you actually use that as a confidence builder and not feel chaos because of it, because it's
yes, and that's the thing, is how we look at things as a teacher really matters, because there's some people hearing this that'll be like, oh, wow, that makes me nervous, and other people will be like, oh, okay, that's empowering. So what mindset are you thinking of it in? Are you rising to the challenge? That's part of the inner work too, is, how can I teach my children to have a strong will if I don't have a strong will? So this is why it takes I spend more time working on myself than them. They're my biggest teachers. Yeah. Should say the child is the curriculum and the teacher.
And they know that, and they sense that, and they know that then that's what they do as an adult, right? Like that is a part of the human journey. So, and I think that's beautiful. Well,
it's tough. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect, and I'm certainly not going to say, I'm saying that I need a lot of work, and I'm working on that.
That is a continued process. Okay.
Yeah, it is. And don't beat yourself up either. I have to say, no, moms already do that enough. So mom homeschooler is twice as bad, or 3 times or 10 times as bad as just, and then also, be careful if you're observing too much of what other people are doing, like, oh, and then you have that feeling like, I'm not doing enough. Oh, look at all that they're doing. Don't do that. Just be like, look, and always focus on, look what we're doing. Look what we're doing. We got a lot done. Look what we all did yesterday. We did this, and really focus on your own homeschool being.
You remember that you don't want that. I think sometimes it looks really pretty, and then you're like, well, wait, I don't want to do that. So it's good to remember that that's not what you really wanted anyway.
It needs to come from uniquely them, or uniquely you. And the another beautiful thing I'll just say about Waldorf is that it's we have this sense that the children are our destiny. They're destined to be with us. They picked us. They chose us, and they didn't choose Susie homeschooler down the street. They chose us. And so you shouldn't bring them stuff from someone else. You should bring something from your soul all the time. Maybe you might do the same project, but it's never going to be exactly the same. It's always going to have a little hint of you in it.
Yes. So, yeah, I say that a lot. They wouldn't have been born to you if you didn't have what you needed to take care of them. So I love that. That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Annie, so much. It was a really fun conversation that I feel like we could definitely continue, but we're going to stop for now.
Yeah, sorry if it was long.
It was great. I hope people aren't overwhelmed. I think they're just going to love it. But if you want to connect with Annie, what's the best way for folks to stay connected with you?
Yes, I'm mainly, I'm trying to stay singularly focused. So I'm mainly on Instagram. The child is the curriculum on Instagram. And in my bio there, I have links to all the other things that I'm involved with. So it's really easy. I have a link tree, and you can look at all the various things I'm involved with.
She does. She has some beautiful resources. I was seeing that she has like planners and things that are really, really beautiful. So definitely check out what she has, because there's a lot of amazing resources, particularly if this Waldorf approach is appealing to you. And the name of that book, one last time, Annie?
It's called The Child's Changing Consciousness by Rudolf Steiner.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. I hope that if you have questions, you'll share them with me or with Annie, and we will help you find answers.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.